All right. Hey, Adam.
Nick.
Good. So I think we can go ahead and get started. Mike, do you want to start recording and start the closed captioning?
Yes, we are recording.
Great. Well, good evening, everybody. Welcome to a meeting of Tax Revision Commission. I think this may be the first time we've done one of our formal semi-monthly meetings in an all virtual format, so it's great to see so many folks. As I was saying a minute ago, there are at least 3 people let me know they were not going to be able to, 4 people let me know they were not going to be able to be here this evening, but are nonetheless really interested in this topic. So glad that we will be recording it and sharing materials. This evening, we have a fairly streamlined agenda. We have one major item. Adam Langley from the Lincoln Institute of Land Policy presented to us back in January. He was one of a couple of presenters and gave a really compelling presentation on the strengths as well as some of the shortfalls in how we relieve DC residents' burdens of residential property taxes. And following that meeting, 2 things happened. One is that we talked with him and he very graciously agreed to flesh out his ideas into some more concrete, actionable policy ideas that we can move forward on. And the other is that the Office of Revenue Analysis has been doing some really interesting work making use of the fact that DC has both an income tax and a property tax and can do some matching of the two so that we can get a much better read on the incomes and the property tax liabilities of DC residents. I just want to shout out, and I know Adam will shout out as well, the incredible team at ORA, Daniel Mohammed, and the rest of the team there that have been, I know, great, taking time out of their day-to-day work to share data with Adam. And so we're looking forward to hearing some of that research as well. Just a note on logistics. The members of the commission you guys are all presenters, so you have the ability to ask questions. I think we have a fairly small group, so if you have critical clarifying questions, feel free to jump in, but otherwise let Adam get through his presentation, and we should have an opportunity for Q&A and discussion, and feel free to use the raise hands function. I'll be a little bit of a moderator here, and members of the public that have joined us, thanks very much for joining. Glad to have you here. I think that's all I have for this evening. This is our final meeting of June. Our next one will be June 11th with a focus on the migration of people and businesses in and out of DC and the tax, the extent to which tax is and is not a driver of that. So with that, I'm going to, unless Gregory, Erica, Jim, others have anything they want to chime in about before we get started? Anything?
Did you intend to say June 11th or July 11th?
I did mean to say July 11th. Did I say June 11th?
I thought I heard that. Maybe.
I clearly have summertime brain. Thank you, Carolyn.
No problem.
Okay, well, we will go ahead and get started. Adam, take it away, and I understand you'll be sharing your own slides and moving them along.
That's right. Let me go ahead and do that. I'm not used to WebEx, so let me try doing this. Oh, sorry. So do you now see my slide, strengthening property tax relief in DC?
Yep.
Yes. All right. Excellent. Well, good evening, everyone. Thanks so much. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you tonight about some ideas for strengthening property tax relief programs in DC. So when you look at data on property taxes in DC, maybe it's a cliche, but I think it's kind of a tale of two cities. On the one hand, for most homeowners in DC, property taxes are relatively affordable and they're considerably below the national average. So, for example, the median homeowner in DC spends about 2.1% of their income in property taxes compared to 2.6% nationally. And as a percent of home value, property taxes in DC are far below the national average. So overall, relatively affordable, modest property taxes on homesteads. But on the other hand, despite spending nearly $170 million per year on property tax relief, there are still some homeowners with very heavy property tax burdens relative to their income. So overall, 18% of homeowners receiving the homestead exemption pay more than 5% of their income in property taxes. If you look just at homeowners with incomes under $75,000, 45% pay more than 5% of their income in property taxes, and 29% pay more than 8%. Now, to clear this dichotomy, affordable property taxes for most, but excessive burdens for some, is not unique to DC. It's a pretty common scenario, but this commission does have the opportunity to make recommendations that could greatly reduce the number of homeowners with excessive property tax burdens while also boosting the cost effectiveness of the district system of property tax relief. So I think those are the two big picture goals. So I'm the Associate Director of Tax Policy at the Lincoln Institute of Land Policy. For those of you who don't know us, the Lincoln Institute is a nonpartisan think tank and private operating foundation based in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and we have offices in Los Angeles, Phoenix, and Beijing. And our mission is to help solve major economic, social, and environmental challenges through the effective use, taxation, and stewardship of land. And property taxes is a big part of that. Now, I've been working on property tax issues for 15 years now. I recently published a major report on property tax relief for homeowners. And so that research combined with this new analysis of DC's property tax relief programs, as Nick said, ORA staff have been very gracious with their time. That really forms the basis for my recommendations today. And again, the overarching goal is to more effectively target property tax relief, to reduce the number of households facing excessive property tax burdens, and to increase the cost effectiveness of the district system of property tax relief. And I'd say there are 4 key recommendations to achieve those goals. First is to strengthen the district's Schedule H circuit breaker. Second is to target property tax relief based on need rather than age. Third is to strengthen the district's property tax deferral program. And fourth is to consider increasing tax relief for renters. Now, I'd say the single most important recommendation is to strengthen the Schedule H circuit breaker. In general, the goal of circuit breakers is to provide relief to prevent homeowners from being overburdened by property taxes, just as an electrical circuit breaker is meant to prevent a circuit from being overloaded by electric current. So that's where the name circuit breaker comes from. And they do this by targeting tax relief to households paying the highest share of their income in property taxes, seniors on fixed incomes, workers who lost their jobs, longtime homeowners in gentrifying neighborhoods, etc. And these programs set a threshold percentage of income that property taxes must exceed before any property tax relief is available. And then the circuit breaker benefit offsets property taxes above that level. So for example, in DC, the circuit breaker offsets property taxes exceeding 3% of income for seniors with incomes under roughly $79,000. And the circuit breaker also covers homeowners under age 70, although the threshold percentage varies with income. The circuit breaker offsets property taxes above 3% of income if AGI is under $25,000, above 4% of income for income of $25,000 to $52,000, and above 5% of income if AGI is $52,000 to $57,600. And in addition, some other important features of the circuit breaker is capped at $1,250 per beneficiary, and renters are eligible for the circuit breaker. Now, I would say that's already a pretty good circuit breaker, but it does have a few restrictions that result in some homeowners continuing to face excessive property tax burden. So this table specifically looks at circuit breaker beneficiaries, and you can see that 41% of them still pay more than 5% of their income in property taxes, even after accounting for the circuit breaker, and 28% pay more than 8% of their income in property taxes. So there are a few steps that the district could take to reduce the number of homeowners with these heavy property tax burdens and to improve the effectiveness of the circuit breaker more generally. The most important recommendation is to raise or eliminate the maximum credit. Again, benefits are currently capped at $1,250. And this cap is the main reason why there are so many needy residents who do not receive adequate relief despite claiming the circuit breaker credit. In fact, in 2019, 54% of homeowners were capped out under the circuit breaker. And you can see the impact of this max credit with this example, which looks at a homeowner with a $20,000 income and an assessed value of $400,000. They get the homestead exemption, but they're not eligible for other relief programs besides the circuit breaker. Now, before the circuit breakers, their property taxes would account for 13.4% of their income, so a hefty burden. Now, the circuit breaker didn't have any maximum credit. It'd be straightforward. Their property taxes would be capped at 3% of their income. But because the circuit breaker is capped at $1,250, they would actually still be paying 7.2% of their income in property taxes under current law, more than double the circuit breaker's 3% target for taxpayers with incomes under $25,000. So again, that max credit means that many needy residents do not receive adequate relief from the circuit breaker. Another important recommendation is to raise the income ceiling, at least for non-seniors. Currently, the income ceiling is $57,600 for taxpayers under 70, and roughly $79,000 for those who are 70 years old or older. And that low income ceiling, relatively low, means that moderate income households are completely ineligible for the circuit breaker, regardless of how high their property tax burdens may be. Now, this table shows the distribution of incomes and property tax burdens for homeowners under age 65. And that dark green row in the middle of the table shows homeowners with incomes of $50,000 to $75,000. So largely ineligible for the circuit breaker. And you can see that 29% of the homeowners in this group paid more than 5% of their income in property taxes. And as a rough general rule of thumb, a good income ceiling for circuit breakers would be around the median household income for a city or a state, and that might be $90,000 or $100,000 in DC. So considerably higher than the current income ceiling. A third recommendation is more of a technical fix, and that's to eliminate so-called notch effects in the district's circuit breaker, where currently small changes in income can lead to large changes in circuit breaker benefits. And to avoid these notch effects, the districts would need to apply threshold percentages incrementally as taxpayers move from lower to higher income brackets, so they would only face the higher threshold percentage on the amount of income in the highest bracket, not on their entire income. So it's similar to graduated income tax. If you move into a higher tax bracket, you only need to pay the higher tax rate on the amount of your income in the higher bracket, not on your entire income. And in fact, almost all states with circuit breakers do apply their threshold percentages incrementally. So this example kind of illustrates how this works. Currently, taxpayers under 70 with incomes of $25,000 to $52,000 the circuit breaker currently offsets property taxes exceeding 4% of income. Now, if the threshold percentages were applied incrementally, then those taxpayers would actually benefit from the lower 3% threshold for the first $25,000 of their income and only face that higher 4% threshold for the next $27,000 in income. And you can see the notch effect by looking at taxpayers at the edge of an income bracket. Currently, for someone earning $24,999, DC circuit breaker offsets property taxes above 3% of income. That's property taxes above $749.97. Now, if they earn $25,000, one more dollar, the circuit breaker then offsets property taxes above 4% of income, which is $1,000. So in that case, a $1 increase in income could lead to a $250 drop in circuit breaker benefits. If the brackets were applied incrementally, as they're done in most states, then they'd only have that 4% threshold applied to that last $1 of income in that higher 4% bracket. A fourth recommendation is to use a property tax credit to deliver timely relief under the circuit breaker program. Currently, Schedule H is administered as an income tax credit, and that means there's about a 1-year delay between when homeowners need to pay their property taxes and when they actually receive relief through a reduction in their income taxes. Now, many states use a property tax credit to administer their circuit breaker program, so benefits are accounted for on the property tax bill itself. In addition, DC could explore the feasibility of using a one-time application for the city's circuit breaker program. So eligible homeowners would automatically receive the circuit breaker credit on all future property tax bills. Information collected on the application could allow property tax administrators to access the homeowner's prior year income tax return and calculate the circuit breaker credit for the taxpayer automatically without the need for an additional application. A fifth recommendation is to use a broader definition of income than federally adjusted gross income, which is currently used for Schedule H. As I'm sure many of you know, federal AGI includes many income sources, most notably a large share of income from Social Security, pensions, 401ks, IRAs, and so most states do include those income sources when calculating circuit breaker benefits. And the problem with using a narrow definition of income is that it can create horizontal inequities where households with similar incomes can receive very different amounts of property tax relief just based on the source of their income. Using federal AGI is one reason why some taxpayers can appear as if they have $0 in income when they actually have, say, $30,000 in retirement income. And then finally, when talking about the circuit breaker, I think it's important to note that the district should continue to provide tax relief for renters. Currently, over 80% of circuit breaker beneficiaries are renters, and this really is critical tax relief, but it could be better targeted, which I'll talk about later in my presentation. So again, I think strengthening the Schedule H circuit breaker really is the single most important step needed to ensure that households in DC do not face excessive property tax burdens. And to do so, the district should raise or eliminate the maximum credit, raise the income ceiling, eliminate notch effects where small increases in income can lead to large decreases in circuit breaker benefits, deliver benefits as a property tax credit, and use a broader definition of income than federal AGI. Now, stepping back, the second big recommendation is to target property tax relief based on need, not based on age. Right now, DC has two major programs for seniors that are particularly expensive and poorly targeted. The credit for seniors and disabled persons provides a 50% property tax credit for homeowners who are 65 years old or older or disabled with incomes under roughly $150,000. In addition, the assessment increase cap credit restricts annual growth in assessed value for those same seniors to 2% per year. Now, of course, it's pretty common to use age as a proxy for whether homeowners need property tax relief, but it really is not a good measure of need. Of course, there are many younger homeowners who also face high property tax burdens, and at the same time, there are many seniors with pretty low property tax burdens who really don't need additional property tax relief. And crucially, it's just not necessary to use a proxy for need when you have an effective circuit breaker program. The circuit breaker design ensures that households who need property tax relief the most get it, regardless of their age. And again, that's because circuit breakers target property tax relief to households paying the highest share of their income in property taxes. So to reduce relief programs based solely on age, the first step would be to reduce or eliminate the credit for seniors and disabled persons. In FY22, this credit cost over $25 million in foregone revenues. And this table shows that that seniors with incomes of $75,000 to $150,000 received a median tax cut of more than $1,800, about 50% higher than the seniors with incomes under $75,000. And that's just because higher income taxpayers tend to have higher valued homes. And so a 50% tax credit will inevitably provide them with larger dollar tax savings. This analysis also shows that 48% of total tax expenditures under this credit went to homeowners with incomes above $75,000. So it is a pretty expensive program and a pretty poorly targeted program. In terms of recommendations, the best option would be to simply eliminate the program and rely on a strengthened circuit breaker to ensure that needy seniors get the property tax relief they need in a more cost-effective manner. A second best option would be to convert the program to a flat property tax dollar credit or a flat dollar exemption, such as a $1,000 credit or a $100,000 exemption. This approach would provide relatively larger tax savings to lower income seniors than to higher income seniors. And then second, to reduce relief for programs based on age, the next step would be to eliminate the 2% assessment cap for seniors, or at least target it more effectively. DC's assessment increase cap credit limits growth in assessed values for all homesteads to 10% per year. And 10% really is high enough to avoid most negative consequences from assessment limits. However, starting in 2023, the assessment cap has been reduced to 2% per year for seniors with incomes under roughly $150,000. It had been a 5% cap from 2019 to 2022, and it had been a 10% cap before then. And in FY22, the assessment cap cost nearly $20 million in foregone revenue. An analysis from ORA shows that the median property tax cut for eligible homeowners was fairly consistent across income groups, but still 55% of total tax savings went to homeowners with incomes above $75,000. Now, a very extensive body of research shows that limits on growth in assessed values have really serious unintended consequences. They really are the most inequitable and inefficient way to provide property tax relief. And the general problem is that assessment limits create large disparities in effective tax rates. So for example, under DC's assessment cap, the tax savings for any individual taxpayer will vary widely depending on two key factors. The first factor is the appreciation rate. Properties that appreciate the fastest will receive the largest tax savings under an assessment limit, whereas properties whose values are growing slowly or declining will pay more. The second factor under DC's cap is the age of the homeowner, or more specifically, how long the homeowner has been covered by that 2% cap. Homeowners who have benefited from the cap for 10 or 20 years will pay a far lower effective tax rate than younger homeowners who either are ineligible or seniors who have only been covered by the cap for a few years. And that's because the impact of low assessment limits really grows and compounds over time. let's say there's someone whose home is worth $400,000 when they turn 65, and it then appreciates at 4% per year. Well, after 1 year, their assessed value is only a little bit below their market value. It's 98%. The assessed value is 98% of the home's market value. But after 10 years, their assessed value would be just 81% of the home's market value. And after 20 years, it would be just 55% of their market value. Now, someone whose home appreciates 6% per year would see far larger tax savings. After 20 years, their assessed value would be just 30% of the home's market value. And it's important to note that tax savings from assessment limits are really largely unrelated to need. In fact, the largest tax savings go to homeowners that are having a high growth in their wealth, specifically a high growth in their housing values. And at the same time, there's no relief to homeowners whose home values are growing slowly or declining. Now, of course, certainly, rapid growth in housing prices does create excessive property tax burdens for some homeowners, but it does not for many others. So again, it's really better to just rely on a circuit breaker to help homeowners who face unaffordable property tax burdens, whether it's due to rapid housing appreciation or some other cause. And then also, it's important to note that this compounding effect means that the cost of the new 2% assessment cap will grow rapidly over time. So the ORA estimated that the revenue loss will grow by about $1 million per year. So in 2023, the first year of the 2% cap, it's a modest revenue loss. Revenues would fall by just $880,000 because of the new 2% cap. But if you extend out that analysis 10 years, by 2032, the revenue loss would be nearly $12 million. So it will take a few years, but this 2% cap will inevitably create some large inequities and large revenue losses. So given those inequities caused by tight assessment limits, the best option would be to eliminate the lower 2% assessment cap for seniors, or at least go back to the 5% cap. The 10% cap for all homesteads is high enough that it should not create permanent inequities, but it will still offer some protection against particularly large spikes in property tax bills. And the second best option would be to better target the lower assessment cap for seniors. And there are a variety of ways this could be done. You could reduce the income ceiling for eligibility. Currently, it's nearly $150,000. That could be reduced to, say, $30,000 to $75,000, more in line with the other property tax relief programs in the district. You could also set a maximum assessed value for eligibility, perhaps $500,000. You could make the assessment cap equal to 2% plus inflation. And or you could set a residency requirement, such as requiring the taxpayers have owned and resided in their home for 10, 20, or 25 years to be eligible for that low 2% assessment cap. Now, the third big picture recommendation is to strengthen the district's deferral program for seniors. Deferrals allow homeowners to delay payment of their property taxes until their home is sold or the owner dies. And at that point, the full amount of deferred taxes are due with interest added. So deferrals kind of work similarly to reverse mortgages, but they usually have lower interest rates and significantly lower fees. And deferrals, they really are a great solution for homeowners who are housing rich but income poor, because they allow them to tap their home equity to pay their current property taxes. Deferrals can provide very substantial tax relief. They usually allow taxpayers to defer their entire tax bill, yet they impose no long-term costs on other taxpayers. And deferrals really ensure that no eligible homeowners will ever be forced to move because of their property taxes when they have that option to defer. Now in DC, the deferral for seniors is known as the Low Income Senior Citizen Homeowners Program. And homeowners are eligible if they're 65 years or older and they have an income under $50,000. And there are a few ways that the district could strengthen its deferral program for seniors. First, it's to raise or eliminate the income ceiling. Again, these programs impose no long-term costs on taxpayers. They're essentially a loan that will be repaid when the home is sold. So if the 50% credit for seniors or the 2% assessment cap for seniors were reduced, then offering a deferral would be a good replacement. Instead of completely foregoing property taxes for higher income seniors, you would at least be giving them the option to defer their property taxes. Second recommendation is to lower the minimum age for eligibility, perhaps to 50 years old. These older homeowners often have significant home equity, but a lower age limit could provide really meaningful assistance to longtime homeowners in gentrifying neighborhoods in their 50s or early 60s. Third recommendation is to reduce the interest rate on deferred taxes and to have it vary with market rates. Setting the interest rate equal to the district's borrowing rate plus 50 basis points to cover administrative costs is about right. A fourth recommendation would be to reduce the required home equity. Currently, homeowners must own at least 50% of their home, and increase the maximum amount of taxes that homeowners are allowed to defer. Currently, that's capped at 25% of assessed value. In contrast, most states just require homeowners to have, say, 15 to 25% equity in their homes. And that's really sufficient protection to protect the government and ensure that they are fully repaid when the property is sold. And in addition, the district may want to work with lenders so that they do not unnecessarily restrict borrowers' ability to defer their property taxes. Finally, fifth and most important is to boost outreach and publicity efforts. In 2021, only about 100 seniors deferred their property taxes under the district's program. And a low participation rate for deferrals is common, and it should be expected because many seniors would prefer to avoid placing a lien on their property. But awareness of deferral options is often very low amongst eligible homeowners, and it's really important that they at least know about this option. Because again, deferrals ensure that no eligible homeowner will be forced to move because of property taxes when they have that option to defer. And then finally, I'd say it's important to note that a deferral program is applied after other property tax relief programs. So for example, low-income seniors, they might see their property tax liability reduced 70 or 80% through a strengthened circuit breaker. Now, some people are concerned about seniors accruing debt through a deferral, but it'll take a really long time for a property tax bill of, say, $500 to $600 a year to seriously reduce the equity in a home worth $300,000, $400,000. And then the fourth big picture recommendation is to provide tax relief for renters. And this is important for two reasons. First of all, renters do pay property taxes indirectly in the form of higher rent. In DC, we'd expect the majority of property taxes on apartment buildings to be borne by tenants. And in many neighborhoods, we'd expect nearly 100% of the property tax liability to be passed forward to renters in the form of higher rent. And in addition, it's important to provide tax relief to renters because on average, they face far higher housing cost burdens than homeowners, and they also have considerably lower incomes. So for example, in Washington, DC, about 40% of renters pay more than 30% of their income in property taxes compared to 22% of homeowners. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the Schedule 8 circuit breaker currently provides significant tax relief for renters. Over 80% of benefits go to renters. And the circuit breaker does this by assuming that 20% of rent is equivalent to property taxes. So if someone pays $10,000 per year in rent, then the circuit breaker formula would be applied as if they paid property taxes of $2,000. And while there are good reasons to use a single program for owners and renters, trying to fit the formula for homeowners and applying it to renters means that the Schedule H circuit breaker currently sets a very low threshold for renters to qualify for the program. Currently, renters qualify for benefits if they spend more than 15 to 25% of their income in rent, depending on age and income. And using such a low threshold for eligibility, just 15 to 25% of income spent on rent, means that the majority of beneficiaries simply receive the maximum credit of $1,250, whether they pay 20% of their income in rent or 50%. So again, this program is also not that effectively targeted at renters with the highest burdens. So it might be better to create a separate relief program for renters that uses a different formula to determine benefits. Typically, 30% of income is considered a threshold for whether a household is housing burdened. So an alternative policy could offset rent above 30% of income, higher than current law. And in addition, by raising the maximum credit to say $2,000, the program could help ensure that the most heavily cost burdened renters receive more assistance rather than just being capped out. And then just one final reason that it may make sense to create a separate program for renters and for homeowners is that the two groups may receive benefits differently. So, and that would be the case if homeowners started to receive circuit breaker benefits as a property tax credit. That's not possible for renters, so they could continue to receive benefits as an income tax credit. So just to recap, DC's current system of property tax relief is not very cost effective. The district spends nearly $170 million per year on property tax relief, much of it going to homeowners with more modest property tax burdens. And yet there are still some homeowners facing really heavy property tax burdens relative to their income. And together, the set of recommendations I laid out this evening would greatly reduce the number of homeowners with excessive property tax burdens, while also boosting the cost effectiveness of the district system of property tax relief. And I know I got into a lot of detail tonight, hopefully not an overwhelming amount of detail, but I'd just like to quickly recap the 4 recommendations. Again, the most important recommendation is to strengthen the district's Schedule H circuit breaker. And to do so, the district could raise the maximum credit and the income ceiling, apply the threshold percentages incrementally to avoid notch effects, deliver benefits via a property tax credit rather than an income tax credit, and use a broader definition of income than federal AGI. Again, an effective circuit breaker will ensure that taxpayers who need tax relief the most, those with the heaviest property tax burdens relative to income, get it. So by strengthening the circuit breaker, the district could also reduce poorly targeted relief programs that simply base benefits on age. The credit for seniors and disabled persons should be eliminated or converted to a flat dollar credit or exemption. The 2% assessment cap for seniors should be eliminated, or at least revert to the 5% cap, or be better targeted with tighter eligibility requirements, such as a lower income ceiling. The third recommendation would be for the district to strengthen their property tax deferral program for seniors. To do so, the district could raise or eliminate the income ceiling, reduce the minimum age for eligibility and the interest rate charged on deferred taxes, and critically, increase outreach and publicity efforts to raise participation rates. And finally, it's also important to provide tax relief for renters. The effort to better target tax relief could be extended to renters by creating a new separate income tax credit for renters that partially offsets rent for those spending more than 30% of their income in rent. So together, these changes, again, would greatly reduce the number of households facing excessive property tax burdens, while also boosting the cost effectiveness of the district's system of property tax relief. So thank you for your attention, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
Great. Thanks, Adam. Thanks so much for that presentation. That was a lot of material, a lot of hard work you've been putting in over the last few months to fleshing out these recommendations. And I think they're really thought-provoking. There's a lot of trade-offs here, a lot of moving pieces that will touch each other. Let me open it up to questions from commissioners as well as comments, because I think it will be really interesting to hear how these recommendations are landing with you all. What's striking you as, without anybody taking a position, because I think there's yet work to be done on landing exactly what these recommendations are going to look like in final form. So what's striking you as, yeah, that makes sense? What's striking you as not making sense? So I think either questions or comments at this point. Go ahead, Carolyn.
This is Carolyn. Yes, I thought it was very, very interesting. You did a great job and provided a lot of, as Nick said, thought-provoking concepts. The senior recommendations and the rentals recommendation for me were most appealing, if you would. I think for the seniors, if you could just share a little bit more about that formula in terms of the income situation and the income formula. Am I making sense?
For the circuit breaker or for the
The circuit breaker. For the
okay.
circuit, yeah.
Yeah. So let me trying to think of this. Could you maybe elaborate? I'm not. I want to make sure I'm speaking to the right issue.
Put the recommendation back up regarding the circuit breaker and how it's relevant to the seniors.
Yeah. So I think let's see here.
And so was it based on one senior in a household or two? That income is for joint returns or
This is raising the income ceiling.
yeah.
So yeah, right now the circuit breaker applies a lower threshold percentage. The circuit breaker offsets property taxes above 3% of income for seniors up to $78,600. That's for like the tax paying unit, the household. And
Okay.
and someone in DC can clarify that if necessary. But I think the point I was trying to make there was not as much about seniors as it is about non-seniors and the benefits of raising the income ceiling for people under the age of 70.
Okay.
And also, like I guess just one point to kind of underline is that certainly there are many seniors who do need property tax relief and they have excessive property tax burdens relative to their income. And it's not to say that property tax relief for seniors should be stripped away. It's that providing it through the circuit breaker has kind of like a twofold benefit of, on the one hand, making sure that the seniors facing really heavy property tax burdens get a really large amount of relief. And conversely, seniors that are, higher income with modest property tax burdens don't receive as much relief. And that money can be used for lots of other things, like whether that is property tax relief for other needy taxpayers or any other priority that the district may have.
Okay, thank you. I'll go back and look at your slides again. So
Yeah,
thanks.
of course.
Dick Gregory was next.
Just one observation, a couple questions. There are a lot of political graveyards in this city of people that try to amend senior housing tax credits. So my commission at least expires with this commission, so I don't have to worry about that. But just to say, it's an extraordinarily sensitive topic, means a lot to a lot of people, and whatever we recommend would, as you alluded to, would have to be explained copiously, because any change is going to be perceived with a lot of trepidation and fear. But my two questions were you said something that really appealed to me about the scenario of what we call the gentrification model, right? Of a elderly couple that wants to stay in their house but can't because of the rising. So it's not so much about income; it's just about, maybe it's fixed. Which of these would you prioritize? Would it be the circuit breaker?
I think that they kind of go together. And so the circuit breaker is kind of step one to make sure that seniors or non-seniors whose property tax burdens are increasing relative to their income receive property tax relief. So the circuit breaker is really critical, but then it's also really advantageous to layer the deferral on top of that, so that if if the remaining property tax liability is still too much for them to pay, they have that option to delay their property tax bill.
To your point, I think, and I'm not saying this is accurate, but maybe the deferral to some sounds like a reverse mortgage. And just as you alluded to, a fear or I want to pass something on to my kids. We just have to work on that. But my other question for you was, do you have any sense of the burden on the OCFO office to administer any or all of these changes? Is this going to be a heavy lift, a medium lift, or a light lift?
Well, so part of my recommendations would be potentially eliminating programs. So that would not be a heavy lift. But I think converting the circuit breaker to a property tax credit, I think, has the potential to really make the program more cost effective. And on the fees, the challenges of doing that, I can't really speak to.
Do you think they have enough information that's already reported to do that adequately?
So my understanding is that they don't. That right now it's not easy for them to connect property taxpayers to the income tax records, and so that's why at least an application that provides at a minimum a social security number and a permission saying yes, I would be happy for the city to look at my income tax record to determine my eligibility for the circuit breaker. That sort of form that collects that information, an identifier would be needed.
Thank you.
Question I have: when the circuit breaker was put in some years ago, has that kept up with inflation, both in property value and in income?
So the question is, has it kept up?
Yes.
Ballpark, I would say it probably has. The district made some significant increases to the income ceiling and the amount of the benefit in like 2018, 2019. And so I think that increase has probably brought to the point where it's at least kind of commensurate to what it had been, say, in 2000. And it certainly seems to be just.
Well, my point is that's 5 years. So. And the question is whether it's kept up with the rate of inflation, meaning that should the circuit breaker number be higher and index it to inflation.
So I'm not certain, but based on the numbers, it seems to me that the income ceilings may be indexed to inflation. The maximum credit may be written into law and not automatically indexed. But again, if someone in DC knows that for sure, I would definitely. I'm not totally certain.
Okay.
Well, I think they're indexed to inflation, but they're not necessarily indexed to what's actually been happening in the housing market.
Right, which is higher.
We have a very different picture of what housing looks like. Eric, it sounds like you were going to answer that question. I know you also have a question of your own.
No, I think that's right. I mean, even if it's indexed to inflation, it probably doesn't keep up with the rising cost of housing in the district, which is pretty astronomical. I really appreciate this analysis and you presenting it to us. It's hard to wrap one's head around all of the different property tax provisions we have in our tax code. I just had a few curiosities. I mean, I think one of the things I think we have a good amount of here in DC is seniors who are homeowners and have multiple generations of their family in the house with them. And so I'm just curious if you thought about that at all, looked into that at all in terms of like those income levels. So they may look like somewhat higher income households, but maybe that's, you know, multiple adults sort of like putting together income and living in a family home, which might, you know, you might consider differently than a single person or a married couple whose kids have gone off and their income is just for them, right? And they're not, it's not like a pooled situation where everybody's pitching in. So that's one question, is whether you thought about that or would have a way to, like, could we add a number of members of the household sort of factor into eligibility to help to account for that? I don't know. I'm also just kind of curious, like how many people are getting all of the different property tax benefits that are out there, if we have any sense of like, you know, for folks who are getting like homestead and schedule H and, you know, have the senior cap or other cap interact with that. Anyway, I'd be curious about that. And then if you had ORA look at the cost or savings of like this package, like if we were to kind of like take your top recommendations and adopt them, does that save us money or cost us money? I'm just curious.
So yeah, a number of questions there. So my understanding of the way, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding of the circuit breaker in DC is that currently the income is like for the tax paying unit, like typically like you know, it could be a husband and wife, but like it wouldn't necessarily include their adult children in the house. And I believe that was a more recent change made to kind of simplify the administrative process and also the application process. So in fact, I think that the current system kind of it certainly doesn't disadvantage multi-generational households. If there are, you know, kind of younger working age adults living with retirees, their income actually would not be counted for determining the circuit breaker eligibility. And I know that there are some people who have concerns about that. And then in terms of people getting many different property tax relief programs, I really don't know for sure. Yeah, I won't try to hazard a guess on that. And then in terms of the cost, I did try to work with RA to cost out, you know, like a package, and it was really quite difficult, largely because a lot of the heavy lifting in this package is through the circuit breaker, and it's just harder to connect the property tax relief programs with the circuit breaker that through the income tax, like changes to the property tax exemptions and credits. You know, if there's lots of different things moving around, I think it's relatively easy to kind of net out the effect of all those changes. It is harder to do it with the circuit breaker. I think that if, you know, this sort of change were seriously considered, you would definitely want to kind of try to do some back of the envelope calculations. And I think that's possible. But right now, I don't think we're all the way there. And also, you know, the proposal that I presented to you today is a little bit different than what I worked with ORA and staff to analyze back in May.
I feel like we will, you know, and these questions are good, and I think Gregory's point about political landmines around seniors and the really legit concerns that we all have about about making sure that seniors aren't getting pushed out of their homes in DC. As we refine programs, we are going to need to work with ORA and maybe build some kind of model that integrates property and income tax data so that we can sort of pull multiple levers. Because the other thing I was thinking, kind of analysis I think would be really useful, is to look at some prototypical situations, you know, because, you know, you were talking you know, thinking about getting rid of the credit for, or scaling back the credit, that sounds, honestly, that sounds like a terrible idea, both politically and, you know, from a policy perspective, unless we can show persuasively that the property tax changes, circuit breaker changes that we're talking about and other changes are really going to come to the rescue of anybody who would be really harmed by that proposal. So we really need to kind of hold these things together.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
But do you have a gut sense in terms of the revenue impacts? You know, if when you look at this, are you thinking if these guys do exactly what I hope they'll do, they're going to come out revenue neutral? Are you thinking if they do exactly what you're going to do, they're going to have to find another revenue source for some of it? How are you, just not holding you to it, but what's your gut sense on what we're looking at here?
I guess my gut sense would be to start with to try to back out a revenue neutral proposal as a starting point, because when you take the lower 2% assessment cap credit and you add that to the senior and the 50% credit for all seniors and disabled persons, that's a significant amount of money that could be put towards a circuit breaker. And then a lot would depend on the exact policy parameters. Like there's no, like, it's not set in stone that the circuit breaker needs to be 3%, 4%, and 5%. Those things could be tweaked a little bit. I think that the circuit breaker, it would be easy to be very expensive. But it would also be pretty easy to just tweak things to make it a revenue neutral package, and doubly so on the renters as well.
Gregory, do you want to jump in? You're on mute. You're muted.
That first slide that you showed, which in layman's terms said that the tax burden on the city and property taxes was relatively small relative to other jurisdictions. So do you have that by income level? Where I was going is a revenue neutral package that you're talking about. If that means that some senior who's making under $100,000 is going to pay more, I don't think is politically viable. I mean, it may be the right thing to recommend. It's a fool's errand to propose it. So I'm wondering if the story, though, could be elaborated in terms of, you know, are there people, to put it bluntly, are there affluent people with homes of the highest assessed value not paying enough?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So I don't know the data off the top of my head. I think that it would be possible to get some, ballpark data using American Community Survey data. But I will say that the district does have a relatively generous homestead exemption, like roughly $80,000, $84,000. So that's pretty high compared to what most other cities have. So if anything, I would think that low income homeowners in DC are, might come out looking even better compared to national averages.
Do you know how
Sorry, I lost you for a I think you're muted again. Maybe the cat did it.
My cat, sorry.
That's okay.
Are there jurisdictions that phase out the homestead deduction for housing or incomes of certain value?
So, the basic like $84,000 homestead exemption available to all ages in DC, those sorts of programs typically don't have any sort of income ceiling attached to
Right.
them. There are many places that do have supplemental or separate homestead exemptions for seniors, such as DC's senior and disabled credit that goes up to for individuals up to $150,000. However, first of all, $150,000 would be pretty high. I mean, I think probably higher than any other state or city that actually kind of bothers to put an income ceiling in. And in addition, while there are some places that use a percent credit, a 50% credit is very high. Like most places that have most places with a homestead exemption for seniors will use a flat dollar amount, which kind of just automatically is going to provide relatively larger tax savings to lower valued homes, and thus I would argue be more cost effective.
Adam,
Well,
one tax credit that is one tax break that is available to homeowners up and down the income spectrum, but it is particularly valuable to higher income taxpayers is, I believe the district allows us to deduct our property tax, claim our property taxes as a deduction on our income taxes, which means that the higher your income, the more valuable that is because your marginal income tax rate is, and the higher the more your property is worth, it gets more and more valuable. So people with high incomes and high value homes are probably getting a pretty large deduction there. I mean, it is subject to the cap on to the limitation on itemized deductions, but it seems like that might be a place to look for a contribution in terms of revenue neutrality.
Yeah, good point.
Other questions, comments?
Well, I'll just wrap up with the political thing. That this is one thing that if we decide that we want to pursue and all these recommendations, and they sound very compelling, this would require, a lot of consultation and sharing, and because, it could come out like a lead balloon if it's perceived as punitive to anybody. So I think it would have to be dressed up in something that's an overall relief, and maybe there's a way that, anyway, but there, homes with huge values, to your point or my point, the homestead deduction isn't that meaningful, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I said it. There you go. Sorry about that, but.
That's a fair point.
Yeah, I think if we had a package around this that was a net gain for a lot of people, then that would make it more palatable. And it sounds like if we were targeting well and doing some of the things Adam's proposing, that would be the case. I mean, I think especially with the Schedule H changes, and in ways that could really help us on the displacement front, which is such a huge issue right now, and something a lot of council members and a lot of people across the city are thinking about. So I feel like we could get there.
Totally agree.
Yeah. On the idea of shifting the Schedule H from the income tax to, being integrated in the property tax system. I just worry a little bit about drop off in participation because, you know, you have so many people that do file income taxes. And obviously, I think we have outreach problems across the board when it comes to things that people are eligible for, and don't, you know, a lot of people don't know about them. I just wonder if you've thought about like what the bridge might be there. Like, is there, I don't know, could we have like a year where, or maybe not even a year, but where people on their income tax form could check a box if they want?
To sign up to
Yeah.
be a property tax bureau. That's a great idea.
I'm just,
That could be a great way to transition it because, yeah, I agree. It could, there's definitely a risk that the participation rate could drop off if it requires a separate application rather than just being part of the income tax return. I think thinking carefully about how to try to keep people in the program like that is really important. And it's just, I definitely think that if overall property tax relief were to shift a little bit from less targeted programs to the circuit breaker, it would just be, I think, more important for that relief to be timely. You know, like if the circuit breaker is ultimately going to provide someone with a $2,000 property tax cut, but they have to wait a year to get that, it could just really limit its value to households. And also, you know, when thinking about the politics, I think, you know, it could be easy for people to miss the property tax relief they're getting if it's just showing up as part of an income tax return.
that's a good point.
Adam, thank you so much.
Of course.
I would love to say, excellent. Your work here is done. Thank you for handing this all over to us. We got it from here. I would love to be able to say that. I fear that's not the position we're in. And if anything, you may have only caused yourself more problems down the line, but we can talk about how to hopefully continue to engage with you on this. Any closing words or thoughts for Adam before we sign off? Okay. Again, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. We'll be back together on July 11th, as Carolyn pointed out. And actually, that week we have a couple of stakeholder engagement meetings that should be really good. One with a group of DC residents who are typically underrepresented in these conversations, low-income taxpayers, taxpayers from communities of color, talking about their experiences, and then probably a very different but also important conversation with folks from the tech sector. So those are both the week of July 10th, as well as our regularly scheduled meeting on July 11th. So you have the next three weeks to rest up for all of that excitement.
I think we'll need it.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks, Adam.
Great presentation. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye-bye.